Good morning and welcome to the Future of Work, Jobs, Roles and Skills for the Circular Economy in Scotland. This is the second in a series of two webinars hosted by Zero Waste Scotland in partnership with Construction Scotland Innovation Centre. I'm your host this morning. My name is Douglas Morrison. I'm the Director of Operations and Future Skills at Construction Scotland Innovation Centre. And for those that don't know us, we are Scotland's National Innovation Centre for the built environment. We're here to accelerate our transition to a cleaner, safer, more productive industry, in addition to ensuring our built environment delivers maximum value for our citizens and communities. If you're not already engaged with what we do, please do check out our website at www.cs-ic.org. I'm joined this morning by a fantastic panel of speakers who are all at the absolute leading edge of circular economy in Scotland, as well as internationally. From Zero Waste Scotland, we're joined by Fiona Craig, Sarah Wotton and Leonore Tobocco. We're also joined by Neil Sutherland, who's founder and director of the award-winning construction design business Macar, and finally by Esther Goodman-Brown, who leads the Circular Jobs Initiative at Circular Economy. Very much looking forward to hearing from you all. Before we begin, we do have a few points of housekeeping to cover. And I'll then hand over to our speakers. Firstly, to ask a question, clicking on questions in the control panel, type in your question and press send. We will try to answer as many as we can throughout the question and answers section of the webinar. There will also be poll questions posed throughout the session. Please do answer them. We'll leave them open for around 30 seconds before closing them down, and we will share the results from those polls as we progress. Your feedback, as always, is extremely valuable, so we will take all questions or comments even on board, even if we do not have time to answer all of them. And finally, we are ably supported by our colleague Danielle, who will be able to respond to any technical issues that you may have through the chat function. So we're going to kick off with our very first poll, and hopefully that will come onto your screen in just a few moments. And in this poll, we're asking on a scale of 1 to 5, what is your level of knowledge of the circular economy in the construction sector? And we're asking you to rank yourself from 1 with absolutely no knowledge up to 5 with real expertise. And we'll leave this poll open for another 10 seconds. You should be able to click on one of the options, and in just a few seconds more, we will flash up the results of the first poll. And so what we see is that most of our audience today are at the lower end of the knowledge spectrum, which is great. Hopefully, certainly our aim is over the course of this session that you increase your knowledge and awareness. And so we'll dive right in. I'm going to hand over to colleagues from Zero Waste Scotland. We have Leonore Tobocco and Sarah Wotton, who are going to be presenting their findings from the Future of Work. And we'll start off with Leonore. Over to you.
Thanks, Douglas. So as Douglas already said, I'm one of the economists at Zero Waste Scotland, and I worked together with colleagues at Zero Waste Scotland and Circular Economy to bring out a report on the future of work in the circular economy that was published at the end of last year. And just to start off, I just wanted to give a bit of an idea of what the circular economy is about. So the circular economy is based on the principles of reducing consumption of natural resources, designing out waste and pollution, and keeping products and materials in use for as long as possible, and then recycling materials that can't be used any longer at the end of their life. And all of this is underpinned by local supply chains and the decarbonization of our energy supply. So all of that goes hand in hand. And I thought it was really, as a demonstration of what that means in the construction sector, for example, I have an example here from Arup that had made the structural design of a temporary building that was located in Eindhoven in the Netherlands in 2017. And For example, in this building, we can see that it consists of multiple elements. So the lower glass structure was saved basically from the deconstruction of an office building, so the glass bit. The top bit was borrowed from a greenhouse supplier, and the panels on the outside, they're made from plastic, and they were collected by Eindhoven's citizens from plastic waste and basically manufactured into these little shingles on the outside. And the whole structure was built in a way that all the materials could be used again at the end of the life. So for example, the timber structure wasn't glued or no nails were used. So at the end, the materials were perfect and could be reused. And I thought that was a brilliant example of what the circular economy can be, and that this building basically embodies the circular economy. About Zero Waste Scotland, we, from our strategic outcomes that we published also last year, we are working on responsible consumption, responsible production, maximizing value from waste and energy, and transforming Zero Waste Scotland to drive radical change in behaviours towards products and resources. So all of our work is trying to drive the transition to a circular economy in Scotland. The report that we published at the end of last year is the first baseline assessment for jobs in the circular economy in Scotland. And it also explores the roles and skills needed for the transition in construction, capital equipment. I am having problems with my presentation, sorry. And the bioeconomy. And all of the results from the first baseline assessment were published also in the Jobs Monitor that is hosted by Circular Economy, that is now basically being filled with the numbers on circular jobs in different countries, for example, Belgium, the Netherlands, and now also Scotland. And it gives you a good tool to compare how the circular economy in the labour market is developing in different countries, where we're at, how far we still need to go. And basically, we started this research and report because there's very little evidence on how far we've come in Scotland in terms of our labour market, and recognizing that people are at the heart of the transition. So if we don't have a labour market that is prepared to take on the challenges and to drive other ways of doing things in all sectors of the economy, we can't accomplish it. So we need to recognize that we need to do more research, we need to educate people, we need to upskill people to actually be able to participate in this transition. And this is an overview of the way that circular jobs are classified. I'm not sure if everyone can see my presentation at the moment. Yeah, so the circular jobs, so this is something that was compiled by Circular Economy, who have jobs and circular jobs program, and it's basically just a representation of how we can think about circular job, what it means, what is a circular job. And in their definition, and what we also used for the report, a circular job is any occupation that directly involves one of the elements of the circular economy or indirectly supports these activities. So what we can see here on the left-hand side is a direct circular job being split into core sectors and enabling sectors. And for example, a core circular sector would be repair, recycling, renewable energy, so everything that is core to the circular economy. And an enabling sector is basically industrial design, digital technology, renting or leasing activities, and professional and networking associations. And these direct circular jobs are supported by education, government services, professional services, and others. So these are just examples. And this is really important. So this classification is not just to represent what a circular job is, but it also has an impact or helps us actually measure circular jobs in Scotland or anywhere, because what we're dealing with is, in terms of economic classifications, is that all businesses are classified under the Standard Industry Classification Code. And the Standard Industry Classification Code, SIC, it is then geared to having us analyze the circular economy. So it doesn't say that so many jobs in construction are associated or in the circular economy, because it's not something that was around the entire time. So it's not something that we can just read how many jobs there are in construction or any other sector. So we need to classify all sectors based on how we think it relates to the circular economy. So for us, all repair services, recycling, and renewable, we're at the center. So all of those jobs are 100% circular. And then we measure how these sectors relate to other sectors. So basically, what share of other sectors that you wouldn't classify as being generally circular or 100% circular, to what extent they deal with the circular economy, so how they are related to the circular economy. And with that, we can measure the degree, the percentage of circular or circularity or circular jobs in those sectors. And we found with our analysis that, so it's a methodology developed by the Circular Economy, and we found that for Scotland, 8.1% of all jobs are related to the circular economy. And out of those jobs, 19% are core circular, 42% are enabling, and 39% are indirectly circular. And we found, and it can also be seen in the Jobs Monitor online, that we're broadly on par with other countries. And so similar analysis have been carried out for the Netherlands and Belgium, and they found approximately the same percentage of circular jobs in the economy. So that shows us that we have achieved something, but there is a long way to go to making our labor market circular and being able to support the transition. So we also found for the breakdown of local authority areas that most of the area, or all of the areas, are between 7 to 9.8% circular in terms of jobs. And that means that there isn't a big outlier in terms of circularity. So that, yeah, that means that they're all broadly on the average for the whole country. And now, so the second part of the report was about the skills pathways in 3 different value chains. And they consisted of construction, bioeconomy, and capital equipment. And here we just wanted to see, like, what are example activities, circular activities that could be done in a certain sector or value chain, and what are the skills that we have or need to develop to actually realize that potential. So for construction, we have offsite construction, closed loop sourcing, and digitization. And Sarah is now taking over to go more deeply into this.
Morning, everyone. I'll just pull my slides up. I've lost my slides. Hold on. There we go. Okay, so hopefully you can see my slides now. So I'm Sarah Watton. I work at Zero Waste Scotland within the Skills and Education team, and worked in partnership with Esther and Leonore and Fiona Craig, who you'll meet later on the panel on this report. So it really was a cutting edge report. As Leonore mentioned, nothing on the circular economy in Scotland exists in terms of number of jobs and thinking about data gathering and evidence for what future roles might look like within construction. We focus specifically on 3 strategies within construction. So off-site construction, so that's the fabrication of buildings more in factories and using modular construction methodology, and that transition from off-site rather than on-site, which is traditionally used. We also looked at closed loop cycling of building materials. So currently, construction and demolition work in Scotland is responsible for about half of Scotland's annual waste. So this strategy really is thinking about how can we make more out of the building materials that are used within construction. So how can we reuse the components of the buildings better? And steel is a good example where at the moment we rely on recycling steel abroad 100%. So, there's much more value in the components that we're using at the moment within construction. And the third strategy we looked at was the digital technologies in building and materials management. So that's thinking about digital literacy within construction, how we're using BIM and other software that you may be familiar with to really think about what is the life cycle of a building, what are the components that we actually need to order to construct the building in the first place, and thinking beyond the sort of arbitrary 60-year life cycle that we give to a building at the moment, like how can we really understand what a building is made up of and how those components can be used for the building or deconstructed to refurbish another building or build a new project. Using the methodology developed by Circular Economy, we found that 1.8% of all circular jobs within Scotland are related to the circular economy. And you can see the direct figure there, it's almost 4,000 indirectly circular jobs in construction. That corresponds to 2.7% of all jobs that exist at the moment in construction of buildings, civil engineering and specialised construction activities. That's by the SIP codes that Leonore mentioned earlier. And construction in Scotland, as you'll know, is a really large employer. There's over 230,000 jobs. So there's a lot of potential within the construction industry, which is why we focused on this within the report. So we look specifically at roles, future roles within construction. So I'm not now talking about jobs or job numbers, I'm thinking about job functions. So if we take the value chain, so we looked at what roles are involved through the whole value chain within construction. So from the extraction of materials themselves right the way through the actual use of the materials to build a building, right the way through to how we actually deconstruct the building itself. So you can look at the report for a bit more information, but I'll highlight, for example, the multi-skilled on-site operatives. That's going to be a real shift that's required in the roles for the future. So if more buildings are prefabricated within factories, then on-site we need multi-skilled operatives. So not just the traditional trades. For example, someone who's an electrician might also need to be able to know how to assemble the modular units together on site. And off-site construction really presents an opportunity to think about the demographic of who is being attracted within the construction sector as well. Moving to this more factory-based off-site construction is a potential for attracting potentially more women within the construction sector, because there's a reduction in the needs to be on site in all weathers and with the health and safety risks that exist in on-site construction. And we looked, as I mentioned, at potential roles and also the skills that are going to be required for these roles. And you can see for the multi-skilled on-site operatives, they're going to need to be able to be flexible, they're going to need manual and technical skills, and also the ability to work with minimal supervision and that self-management to enable them to do that. And you can see a suggested sort of qualification level that we think that they'll require. And that's thinking about cross-training, which I'll come on to later, how we're using the training routes to prepare people for these multi-skilled on-site operative roles where they'll need a multitude of trades. So another role, as an example, roles that we looked at were site analysts, deconstruction auditors, and urban miners. So we need people who are going to have the skills to understand how to take a building apart. As Leonore gave the example in her presentation, what a building's made up made up of in the first place. So what are the specific components? And we need deconstruction auditors to come along and have the skills to really understand the materials, like how can the timber be taken apart carefully so that it can be reused for another project, or reused for refurbishment, for example. And likewise with urban miners and site analysts, we need people who have the skills to really understand how we can harvest those components to get the most out of their value and reduce the amount of waste that's going to landfill. And the skills that they're going to need are not only the technical skills and the understanding of materials, but also the digital skills. So how can they use BIM, for example, to really understand what a building is made up of, in the introduction, for example, of materials passports, to really understand what are those components within the building and how can they be repaired carefully and reused at the end of life. And in addition, there's the more meta skills, so thinking about how they can actually communicate this information, how they can work with architects, for example, or people in procurement to actually encourage them to buy the materials once they come to their end of life in a certain project. Sorry, I'll just go back to this one. And then finally, thinking about facility managers and asset managers. So actually how a building can be used, and again, thinking about BIM, but also having the management and leadership skills and the confidence to be using, digital software better, to think about how we can carefully maintain a building while it's in use. So within the report, there are a variety of case studies, and we specifically asked people within industry around what skills they require currently within their workforce and in the future. And Kinetech, a company that you may be familiar with, we interviewed them around their product, which they have, which is the K-brick, and that is made from construction and demolition waste. So again, it's thinking about the end of life material and bringing that back into that value chain. So how can we actually take that waste and make it into a brick so it can be used to actually build a new building. And a key finding within the construction sector, but other sectors that we looked at in terms of transitioning to the circular economy, is the skill set, but also the mindset. So really recruiting people who have a firm belief that their sector, i.e. the construction sector, can be more sustainable, that things can change, and that there can be this new way of thinking, new gaining of skills, new gaining of a mindset to make the most out of the building components that we have and reduce extraction of raw materials that we currently rely on at the moment. So overall findings in terms of skills implications for the construction sector, as I mentioned, we're going to have a shift in thinking about multidisciplinary operatives and graduates who are working in this interdisciplinary construction world, and actually how they're prepared. So how can we ensure that the training routes, be that apprenticeships or other training routes, are really preparing this future workforce for this new way of working, so that they are gaining skills across disciplines. I gave the example of an electrician, for example, earlier, but we need people who are going to be able to be on site to assemble buildings in completely different ways to we've had before. I touched on digital literacy. That's a really strong theme within many of the roles that we've highlighted within the report and that I've highlighted today. So that people who are going to be able to use BIM to actually create almost like a 3D model of the building that they're going to be using. That's requiring digital literacy very strongly, and then allowing them to order the correct amount of materials, but also thinking about that materials passport that will accompany a building in itself. So how can we make sure that people in these roles for the future have the skills to engage with BIM in that way, to understand what are the components of buildings, and also in terms of the facilities managers, how, if there's a certain part of the building that needs to be repaired, how they can use this digital information better. I touched on the need for innovative forms of learning, so thinking about that cross-disciplinary way, and also bringing industry and education routes together. So making sure that the skills demand in industry is feeding back into the education systems, so that the current and future workforce are prepared for this sort of new way of working. And really, really strongly, there needs to be the demand in the first place for circular construction skills that will drive public procurement. So we need to make sure that architects, for example, are aware of the demand for reusing timber, for example, within their projects, rather than buying new timber, for example. So that demand needs to happen for this to come to life, and for us to move to sort of 10 out of 10 jobs within Scotland for the circular economy. So across all of the sectors that we looked at, not just construction, there needs to be some fundamental changes for us to fully embed the circular economy in Scotland. So improvements in the actual resource management infrastructure that we have in Scotland, so that there is a reduction in waste, and we're thinking about waste better to maximise the value. Steel is a component that I touched on earlier. And also the integration and demand for embedding the circular economy within private and public procurement as well. That needs to happen for us to make sure that we have the right policies in place to support this drive, and allow people to actually procure components that have already been used, for example. And as I touched on, not just in the construction sector, but across Scotland, there needs to be development of digital skills. But I highlighted reasons why, particularly in the construction sector, that's an important digital literacy increase that needs to happen. And some key takeaways in terms of thinking about the ways forward. So thinking about the systems change that's going to be required to fully embed the circular economy in construction and in other sectors. So how are we thinking holistically? I highlighted there the value chain, about the whole workforce required, from extraction of materials right to the use of them to their end of life as well, and how we're preparing this workforce as well. In addition, it's important that we're promoting these roles for the future correctly, and promoting construction as a career destination with roles such as multi-skilled operatives. So working to create career profiles highlighting the skills that young people in schools at the moment are going to require for the future to be able to work in this way, be that as a deconstruction auditor or a materials scout, with the skills to fully understand the components of buildings locally within their area for new projects. And again, that has implications for the supply chains of materials that are going to be used in construction. We also need to fully embed this circular thinking within the existing skills landscape. So again, working with colleges and universities and the people who are training the workforce at the moment, as well as working collaboratively with industry, and make sure that demand is delivered for within our education and skills systems. And I mentioned that strong need for digital literacy and transferable skills, as well as the meta skills such as leadership or communication skills, as there's a transition to this sort of new way of working. So I'm going to leave it there. Our email addresses are present in front of you. We're very happy to take questions within the panel today, or if you want to contact us to know a bit more about the report. There's much more information within the report itself. And I'm going to hand over to Neil.
Hi, Sarah. Thanks very much for that. And thanks for keying me up. I'm just going to get this presentation up. Hi, everyone. Welcome from me from the Highlands. Hang on a sec. Right, that's interesting. Okay. Okay, folks, I'm hoping you can actually see that.
Yep, we can see it. Perfect.
Okay, that's great. Okay, I've got 10 minutes. I'm going to run through what we're up to in the Highlands here. So it's a quick overview of the company, which I founded around 20 years ago. We've delivered around 200 houses and other buildings in that period. Currently, we're about 50 people, but we're recruiting at the moment. Our capacity is around about 15 houses complete per annum at the moment, and our turnover is around about 5 million. Now, why is that not going forward? Okay, that's interesting. Okay. It's always something to challenge us. Okay. Here we go. There's a bit of a delay, I think, on the change. Okay, so in the minutes I have remaining, I'm hoping to run through just these 4 key themes. So, changing organizational models. We've already sort of touched on this with Sarah just a few minutes ago. Supply chain outreach, embracing digital, what that means in business terms, and I'm going to leave you with an example of housing as a service proposition. And it's really struggling to change this slide. Here we go. This is it. It's down in the bottom left corner. That's what it is. Okay, so if we're anticipating different outcomes and the means defines the ends, we need to use a different approach. And I think it's underestimated just how important organizational models are. So Macher operates with a traditional pyramid management system. We work more in enabled teams and self-managed individuals. So this is a really important point, actually. Again, to organize myself here. And we work within what we describe as a biogenic offsite manufactured space. So it's really, we're interested in renewable materials, particularly timber, which is no great surprise in the Highlands. We're actually quite expert in this. But we combine that with a factory approach and very much embracing digital. We're interested in reaching out further to just our activities, to the challenge of decarbonisation at scale. I'm going to touch on that in a minute. And also we mentioned this term horizon circular economy. So that's really about the decisions we're making today are going to affect generations into the future. So the next 100, 200 years. Nature-based solutions, that's a term that's being used very kind of not very commonly now, and that's really working with natural forces rather than against them, which is a kind of obvious thing. And pull all that together, we're mobilizing and taking climate action on a daily basis. So that's important in relation to the overall evolutionary purpose of the organization. People are at the center of what we do, and with that in mind, today, for example, it's snowing in the Highlands. There's about 100 mil of snow on the ground. It's cold, it's fairly miserable. Although we are working in our workshop, we're working 16 hours. We've got 2 shifts on at the moment. We're also assembling on site, so we have a team out on site as well. Snow doesn't stop us doing that, but what really is at the center of what we do is the quality processes that happen in this workshop. This is absolutely key to what we do in terms of consistent quality outcomes. So really it's designed for manufacture and assembly rather than not manufacture for design. As I've mentioned, it's process innovation, not so much material innovation, which is an important aspect, but we are talking about how things actually go together and the processes that enable that. And no tongue in cheek here, it really is about building people. It's about building the skill set, the confidence, the ability for people to work together to create value that our customers are prepared to pay for. And how we work here, this is not a staged kind of photograph here. This shows a number of team leaders. Actually, we've got a designer, we've got a structural engineer, we've got an operations manager, technical manager, and a production manager, all sitting around. This is in the summer in our distanced outside space, and they're all problem solving. Okay, so what we're doing there is it's an integrated approach to actually coming up with solutions to things, and this is the way we work. We come together in teams. We sort things out in terms of the theoretical idea, the practical idea, and the overall business intention, and that's how we make decisions. Another example here, again, this isn't staged, this is in the workshop, and this is fully understanding that those that are actually undertaking operations are the best people generally to improve them. So it's a continuous improvement kind of process. So, but that's enabled by a great deal of experience. So the guys on the left, for example, have about 50 years of experience between them, believe it or not, and the guys on the right are the guys putting things together. We have the only female apprentice joiner in the Highlands at the moment, sadly. And that leads to exceptional outcomes. So here's an example of us integrating PV panels onto a roof panel. So the roof finishes on there, and that goes to site and gets rapidly assembled into a finished product. And we can be ambitious in terms of our overall outcomes. So every one of our buildings is net zero. Most of them are passive house. We're moving over to fully passive house with everything. And we've done the numbers, so we know about this. So the upfront and operational carbon issues are all covered. It's a clean, direct process. It's changing the whole kind of basis of construction, really. It's not just housing. Here's a project that we managed to deliver over the summer. This is south of the border. And all of the materials there, all the timber materials are all sourced in the Highlands. We made up the 50 trusses that you're seeing there and shipped them down south. And that's an example of what we're able to do. Supply chain outreach, this is really important. We need to work very closely with our suppliers. This picture is of a company called Logie Timber that we work very closely with. So we're sourcing all of our materials from the Highlands and Moray. These guys are growing at the same pace as ourselves. That's important because we need our suppliers to grow as well. This is the challenge we have at the moment. So here's the supply chain. We've done some work on this with Napier University, and it turns out that quite a number of the key materials that we use are pulled in from thousands of miles away. So we're working with various characters across the public and private sector in Scotland to improve that. Here's another image really that captures this biogenic idea. So we're working with customers, landowning customers, to look at supply chain and working on master plans and other opportunities to actually develop the forestry sector and its management. It's rather important to us. So quite a lot of work's been done over the last 10 years, particularly on timber product development, but it's not been commercialized, and that's really the next real challenge. So it's not just structural components, it's things like insulation, materials. We can be doing all this in Scotland if we choose to do that. So we need to work very hard to actually pull that forward. Enabling digital, this is really key because what we're actually moving towards in relation to delivery of construction products is what I would describe as components that are made from different companies. So they're made across the country and they come together for assembly. So here's an example. This is some work we're doing with actually installing windows into our panels into our workshop. So we learned from Passive House experience really in terms of reducing thermal bridging. We actually had to put windows into panels in a different kind of manner. So we're actually insulating the frame first, so that the tricky bits are actually done in a second workshop we have here, and that component's then taken and dropped into the panel. Service modules, so we've done a lot of work on this over the years, so we're actually able to make service components. There's one with two service units, so a bathroom and a shower room. There's on a trailer ready to go to site, so that's lifted off and forms the corner of a building. Here's another example of one being dropped into a house, and that inside that module is fully finished and it's fully plumbed as well. So just final couple of images. Just wanted to run through this very briefly. So this is some work we've done in lockdown, and this is looking at a 2-bedroom starter unit as a terrace. And what we're looking to do is optimize this as a product effectively, so it can be purchased and it will work effectively and all the equipment is optimized. I think I've kind of run out of time, so we can maybe answer questions on that later. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Neil. Absolutely fascinating insights into how you're really pushing forward and existing at that leading edge of circular practices. So I'm sure our audience will absolutely want to hear more as we progress into the Q&A session. We are going to now open up the second poll of this morning's webinar. It should be coming up in your screen in just a moment. And what we're really looking to find out, is you've obviously heard from Sarah, Leonore and Neil so far. Given what you have heard this morning, how likely are you to discuss the circular economy with your colleagues in the construction industry? And what we're asking is, are you very likely? Is it possible? Or are you unlikely to follow up on this? And again, we'll leave this open for just a few more seconds. And we'll close the poll and share the results with you. I'm delighted to see that most of our audience are very likely to go forward and discuss the circular economy. So that's exactly what we're here to do, is to inspire and to kick off those conversations. Now, our panelists should just be appearing on screen before you. We are going to have a very quick run through with some pre-arranged questions, starting with Fiona Craig. Fiona is the Education and Skills Manager at Zero Waste Scotland. Good morning, Fiona. The first question I have for you is really around how your work on circular economy within construction links to net zero.
Okay, morning everyone, morning Douglas. Thank you for the question. How does our work link with net zero? Well, obviously, Scotland has a carbon footprint, and what we've discovered is that 4/5 of our carbon footprint is in relation to all the products and services and goods that we produce and consume and import, because this is a global issue. It's not just about what carbon emissions we produce in Scotland alone. It's actually in relation to everything that we consume and produce. And what we found is 4/5 of that carbon footprint is in relation to that, which is obviously of concern, and it's heating the earth up at an alarming rate, including, of course, all the waste that's produced in relation to that. So at Zero Waste Scotland, we are the lead agency for circular economy, and we are very much thinking about how embedding circular economy principles in the education and skills landscapes can help maybe reduce that terrible statistic. I think it's worth noting that Scottish Government have just actually published a Climate Emergency Skills Action Plan. It's just published in December there, and it's a 5-year plan for Scotland. And it's actually really where the climate change agenda meets education and skills agenda. And for anybody not familiar with it, that I would definitely recommend that you look at that. That's about developing new quality green jobs, but for us it's about embedding green and circular economy skills into all education and skills agendas. It very much talks about the kind of strategic actions that need to happen around that, but there are cross-sectoral actions, and in particular there are construction ones as well. So for example, Zero Waste Scotland is going to be leading on a programme, a construction retrofit programme, and that again might be of interest to people out there. That has not been scoped out, if you like, yet, but that's the kind of where we would like to influence, if you like, the climate change agenda. We also have other resources around construction. We have a construction team, and they're doing a variety of demonstrator projects. We have an education skills team, and I noticed in one of the questions, you know, can we help people in terms of some of the content with regard to yes, talk to us. So yes, in terms of how we link to net zero, circular economy principles being embedded in all curricula will help us to make that transition, I think, to net zero.
Oh, thank you, Fiona. And it's really heartening to hear that Scotland's key public sector agencies are really looking at that alignment and coming together. You know, both around the skills agenda but also the wider circular economy net zero agendas, which is great to hear. Just very briefly, I mean, you've touched on education and training. You know, what can education and training providers or how can they best prepare for this transition to a circular economy and net zero?
I think the circular economy is going to have an impact across all sectors. I think it's important, although today's talking about construction, Douglas, and we're working in partnership with you on this, it is going to maybe increase demand for particular existing roles in, for example, engineering, and other existing roles will also be transformed. I think it'll create demand for a different combination of skills and ways of working. And we're going to need a variety of skill sets that Sarah highlighted in our presentation there. And we need gradually evolving skills, mindset and behaviours to change. And we need training programmes and new business models to be created. So that synergy between industry, colleges, academia, excuse me, to change this and basically incorporate it into all workforce planning and education and learning context is going to be very, very important. So you've got the high level stuff that Sarah talked about. We need to, in particular in construction, make sure that digital skills, digital literacy is increased. And I know you're active in that space, we're active in that space, and others are too. But we need to take action on that now. And also in terms of public-private procurement and making sure that, you know, it's not always those raw materials. We need to think about what these new roles will look like. If we're going to train the future workforce to be an urban miner or material scout, what does that look like? What are the skills required there for those functions? So in terms of colleges, educators of all, whether teachers in schools, colleges, universities, within industry, training providers, we need you to get involved in this and help us to embed circular economy principles into all the learning that people have to do, and think about the careers as well as, again, Sarah mentioned in the presentation, careers. How do you become someone that's going to do some urban mining or material scouts? We have, just to very quickly say, there are a range of resources. You have resources at the Innovation Centre. You have lots of videos and tools and so on that people can use. So does Zero Waste Scotland. We have a construction team. We have a whole range of webinars we've done. We've got tools, techniques. We're developing demonstrator projects to show best practice. We have an exemplar of a net zero plan for companies to use. And all of this, I think, will also link into the climate emergency skills action plan that I mentioned
Indeed.
before.
And I think that's probably a good point, Fiona, to bring Leonore in. Leonore, you've clearly focused on these kind of 3 key areas around off-site construction, closed loop cycler build materials, and digital technologies in building materials management. And why did you choose to focus on those areas specifically, and were there other areas that were in scope?
Yeah, so we're being asked that for basically all of the 3 value chains that are in the report quite a lot. So why did you focus on this? Why did you not focus on something else that we might want to talk about? And I think so this is the first report we've done on the labour market in the circular economy in Scotland, and it was just a starter to get us started on thinking about what that would look like. What is an example of a circular activity in construction, for example? What are things we might already be doing or that we see great examples of in the Netherlands or anywhere else abroad? So this is a starter, and there's so we do want to go into it more deeply in the future and have basically an assessment of maybe everything that we could do in construction. So for example, utilizing buildings better, so not having buildings that are standing empty while you're building others somewhere in the suburbs or somewhere else. So it's really about just having a first idea of what we could be looking at, what comes out of this first assessment, and then go and look at other activities that are there or that we might get involved in as well. So they're great other examples that we do really want to look at.
No, excellent, thank you, and I'm sure our audience would like to hear more about that. I'm going to bring in Esther Goodman Brown, and Esther, you lead Circular Jobs Initiative at Circular Economy. What I wanted to ask you, so we're hearing about this potential for for job creation within circular economy, but alongside that, what do you see as the big investment, or sorry, the big opportunities when it comes to improving the quality of jobs and wider inclusivity within the construction sector?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is a really important question, because at Circular Economy, we've developed this approach for measuring the number of jobs that currently relate to the circular economy. But really, in lots of cases, it's going to be about a transition of roles in line with changing demands. So it's going to be, who those jobs are for and what they feel like that's going to change, rather than necessarily the number of them. And I think it's different for different sectors, but particularly when we looked at off-site construction and the opportunities within the construction sector, it was saying, how and will jobs look different in the linear and the circular economy? And so Neil's already given the great example of his team able to be, sheltered from the elements and working in a factory. So if we're shifting away from a traditional dominant workforce that is out there on site to more work that might be seen as more similar to the manufacturing industry, there's the opportunity to welcome people into the workforce that might find a sheltered workplace to work, more regular working hours, a more regular location, much more appealing. So particularly people with caring responsibilities, people that aren't able to travel to different distances or spend a long time on site in a project. So there's a real opportunity to bring in a very different type of workforce, maybe transition away from a predominantly male workforce that we see at the moment. And also in terms of digital literacy, this has come up a couple of times, but is incredibly important, because we're talking about these new innovations coming into the market and these new approaches we could be using. But as the base level, we need to ensure that in order for people to be able to step into those roles, so for them to be inclusive and for local people to be able to take them up, that those base level of digital literacy and the digital skills and the understanding of these new processes is going to be needed.
I mean, it's really interesting. So what I'm hearing there is, we are talking about a transformation of process and practice. We're talking about transformation of workforce, the diversification of both the workforce and the the skills that they develop. I mean, how do we do that? How do we make sure that the right training opportunities, the right routes into the education and skills system are available for our developing workforce?
I mean, it starts with a commitment from government and from agencies like Zero Waste Scotland that the circular economy is a priority and that we are going to work in translating that priority into education and training pathways. So it's about reflecting the industrial structures within those training and education pathways. And then it's also about commitment from industry to work with government and with education to design the right type of courses to mean that people have the right skills. Because there's a lot of research to say that educators think that they're providing students with the right skills to move into the labour market, but actually on entering there's a real gap and a lot of on-the-job training is required. So it needs to be a sort of a co-development effort in terms of the new qualifications or the new assessments that might be needed for the different skills that go with these processes, so that we can make sure that the existing workforce has the opportunity to upskill and to take up these new opportunities, but then also with the new generation coming in, that they've got the right skills and that those education packages are designed in a way that they could be updated increasingly as these new innovations come in.
No, indeed. Thank you, Esther. It's a really interesting time, within that education and skills system. So I have no doubt that this report will help to inform and drive indeed what this looks like in the future. We're hearing a lot around public sector partnership and of course that interface between public sector and industry. I'd like to bring Neil in at this point. I mean, Neil, you are running a successful business and you continue to grow at pace, but you are also running a business that's very much going against the grain of those more traditional practices and processes. And I guess the question I have for you, I mean, why is circular so important to your business, and what does the model look like going forward?
Yeah, thanks for that, Douglas. Well, first thing I should say is that we've been at this for quite a long time. Personally, I've been developing this whole approach for close on 30 years, so we're in danger of becoming an overnight success. The circular approach and attitude represents the future. It's a break from the way things are normally done, and I couldn't stress that enough, how important the organizational role, that the model of organizations has to progress away from 18th, 19th, 20th century models to future models. And there's examples of this across different sectors. It hasn't infiltrated construction a great deal at the moment, but this kind of thinking has to percolate all the way through the whole process now. So we've just been talking, for example, about public-private kind of working together. Construction tends to be cyclical. It goes through, it follows the economy up and down. We need to break that kind of attitude as well. And to do that, we really need commitment from the public sector, really, I mean, the whole manufacture side of things depends on a long pipeline of work. So the investment we're putting in today, we're thinking about how that's going to impact in the coming years. So we need a change of thinking, a change of attitude across the board, really, which is great that we're able to come together and discuss these things. So we're not going to see private commitment into this until we actually see government and other agencies kind of fully embracing a change of attitude and really meaning it, really meaning it. So that's important. The other hugely important thing is attracting bright young people into the sector. We've got a real problem with that. We've got an image problem. It's not just the fact that companies don't invest in training generally in our sector. It's because we're not very attractive to young people. And most of the brightest and best run off and study engineering or architecture, some of these things. I did that myself. And, you know, those that, construction generally is just not an attractive sector to be involved in. So we need to change that. It's unbelievably exciting when you get in about it, but it's just that we don't have that. We can't, we struggle to get the image over, the message over. So we need to work hard on that together, because there's nothing more exciting than putting buildings together that change people's lives. It's fantastic. So, that also sort of chimes with the kind of climate action we need to take. So it's great to see young people getting involved in taking action around climate, but wouldn't it be great if they actually got involved in real practical things that are making a difference, both in terms of land use management and the built environment. So we have so many opportunities in these areas, and we need to make progress in the next 10 years. Big progress.
Indeed, and well said, Neil. I think what I'm hearing through almost a recurring theme is that theme of confidence. Confidence in pipeline, confidence in long-term meaningful investment. Confidence that developing workforce has around the industry representing that career of choice, but also confidence that collectively we can make a real difference. So it's fantastic to hear. Now I'm conscious that we have questions that are coming in from our audience. I'm going to pick them up in no particular order. To start off with, a question from Paul. Paul is saying that he's introducing BIM modules for all Kickstart candidates as part of the DEC Level 1 curriculum. Can Zero Waste Scotland provide some input to this initiative? There's lots of acronyms in there. I hope our colleagues at Zero Waste Scotland understand what's been asked. Perhaps, Fiona, are you best placed to respond to that one?
Yes, thanks, Douglas. Yes, Paul, come and talk to us. Let's talk more about what it is you need here. We do have resources, and we've got a range of different things, from videos, some content, etc. that perhaps I'm sure we'll be able to help out in some way or another. Also, just to kind of mark up that we do have an active project just now with Skills Development Scotland, which is creating a suite of online materials, resources that would enable people in vocational education to evidence their core and/or meta skills. Meta skills was mentioned previously. These are the high order skills that all employers will be looking for in the future. Very much the kind of modern version, if you like, of core skills. Things like creativity, innovation, resilience, and so on. So that project is hopefully by the end of March, we'll have this suite of resources that will be open to all assessors, lecturers, and vocational learners, that will enable them to start understanding some of this. So yes, come and talk to us, Paul. Happy to help.
Zero Waste Scotland for some time. There's a lot of good content there. There's a real willingness to engage with the education and skills system. So I'm sure that anyone that is out there who's trying to build up an understanding, trying to access good quality content, there's lots there. Esther, I'd like to bring you in for the next question, leading on from kind of some of the points you're making around training. I have a question that's came in from Karen. Karen's asking what you would recommend for training people in circular economy. So are there SVQs or work-based learning pathways already exist? And what would be the best way to get started or to include within current construction training?
Yeah, thank you for the question. There are different ways that you could do this. So in terms of just circular economy 101, what is it? Why is it relevant to my sector? There are different sorts of online trainings, these MOOCs, these massive online courses that can be done and can be done alongside work. And I think are a really nice way of getting to understand how the circular economy relates to the construction sector, but also that wider picture that helps so much with this confidence and overall transition.
Can I just double check with the panelists? We seem to have lost Esther's sound. Is it only with me? Can everyone else hear?
Fine.
Everyone else can hear. It's just me. Sorry, Esther. Carry on.
That's fine. Carry on. And there are great examples, particularly in the construction sector, of countries that are already starting to integrate circular economy in particularly vocational training pathways. Germany is quite strong on this. So I'd say there's a mixture of bringing in some examples from other countries. We can share some resources and getting some inspiration in how to integrate it in existing courses. But then there's also that wider piece, that awareness, which I think is really helpful when you're trying to get lots of collaboration and commitment towards the moving in that direction internally.
No, thank you, Esther. Unfortunately, my sound was off for most of that, but I have no doubt it was a fabulous response. Yes, absolutely. I'd expect nothing less. So yeah, I mean, the final question that I'd like to pose to our panel, actually, it's for you again, Neil. We have a question that's come in from Owen, and Owen is asking that in relation to the embodied carbon perspective, he's wondering if you use homegrown structural timbers in projects, or whether the timber is imported. He does provide the clarification that he's aware that homegrown timbers may not offer the same structural properties as other imported species.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Owen. The way I'd describe that is that what we've done at MACA is we've looked at the resource and we've responded to that. So we've looked at the Scottish resource available in terms of timber, and instead of designing something and then looking around to see what we use to make it, so it's the opposite way around. And I can confirm that 98% of our structural timber is secured from Scotland, mainly from the Highlands. The other 2% we pull in terms of engineered products, and that's something we should be doing more of in Scotland. So these are things like glue laminated beams, for example, which we need for certain applications. Generally in Europe, the development of timber engineering products closely matches the uptake of off-site construction. Now, that's one of the things that's hindered the uptake in this country. Having said that, we can still use the materials we have here. And pretty much, as I say, most of the materials we use are secure from Scotland. We've actually done the embodied carbon accounting. We worked with a company called Ecolab last year. It goes back actually many years we've been looking at this. And we know that when we deliver each one of our houses, they're net zero on delivery. And that's rather important to us. So it's becoming as important as any other accounting. So the financial accounting of and that message to the customer. Our customers want to know now that what the carbon audit is as well. And I think from a business point of view, a marketing point of view, this is becoming more and more important. And we should be proud that we can use our own timber from Scotland, and it's entirely suitable for high quality buildings.
Excellent, thank you, Neil. And a great message for us to close off our panel session with. We have just received a clarification from our audience around DEC, which was mentioned earlier in the question that Paul had posed. So DEC class of your own are currently delivering a pilot in Newcastle, which is the first time that it's been delivered outside of school. And just noting that Kickstart is providing a great funding opportunity to address all the issues raised on skills. And I know certainly we at Construction Scotland Innovation Centre, we've been close followers and partners of Class of Your Own for some time, and recognise that they do wonderful work. So if you're not aware of what they're doing, or you're not aware of this new pilot that's been delivered in the northeast of England, then I'd highly suggest checking it out. So we are now going to progress on to our very final poll of the session, poll number 3. We are asking in poll number 3, on a scale of 1 to 5, what is your level of knowledge of the circular economy in the construction sector? So it's a repeat of our first poll, and really what we're looking to see is whether you have enhanced your knowledge of the circular economy. So we will just leave that open for another few seconds, and you should see the results on your screen. And my goodness, what a magnificent impact we've had today. So very clear enhancement of knowledge following the session, and a testament to our contributors today. So in wrapping up, firstly, I'd like to thank all of our panelists, all of our contributors, for giving up your time and sharing your expertise and insights with us this morning. I personally have found it a fascinating experience, and have learned more, which I suppose is the key aim of these sessions. Thank you all to our audience members for joining us and for posing your questions. Once you receive your feedback form, please do take a few minutes to fill it out and provide us with those valuable comments that we can use to improve our future webinars. This webinar has been recorded, so we will be making it available on the Construction Scotland Innovation Centre YouTube channel early next week, and relevant links are provided in the chat box to all of our online and social media channels. So thank you once again. Have a wonderful rest of the day, and please do keep your eye out for future webinars. Thank you, everyone.